John, and welcome back to Luton. It's certainly been a while for you. Do you remember the time when you first set foot in the place?
Well, Luton has a really special place in my heart. You know, not just because it's where it started for me at 16, but it's where it started for me at 10 years of age. I remember coming up with my parents and meeting Steve Foster. I was just a tiny little kid, very small, lots of ginger, orange hair. Meeting Steve Foster, who was the Luton centre half at the time, wearing the headband, and then that was Fozzie, what he's famous for. And then I kept coming back and forth in the school holidays up until I was 15, 16, and then I got offered an apprenticeship to come and do a 2-year scholarship with Luton. And as I said, it started at 16, and then it progressed. And at 19, then after 50 something appearances, it was. I got moved to Arsenal, but Luton as a place was always a happy place. You know, they always used to put me in nice digs and with really nice families, and I just loved coming back and forth to Luton on the train. And I've never been back as a player, but it's great tonight that I'm back here now. Tonight, 20 years on, and some old faces here and faces that like Mick Harford and one or two other people. And Luton, as I said, all the clubs I've played for, the Celtic and the Champions League and Arsenal and all this, but I've really fond memories of not just playing for Luton, but Luton as a place. I sort of grew up here. I left Swansea at a very early stage in my life, 16. I was very young. I was from a council estate in Swansea in Wales. Left my family and friends behind to come and pursue a football career. So I've lots and lots of memories, and all good memories really of my childhood growing up here.
You say you moved away from home at a young age. What was that like?
That was tough because I was very close to my family and one of 4 children, and older brother, older sister, younger sister. And as I said, we were a very close-knit family. I had my friends on the estate, and I went to school in Swansea, and so it's always a big step for a kid to move away from home, and that's what you are. You are a kid at 16. But I quickly settled in, and as I said, I got opportunities in the reserves, in the first team with coaches like Jimmy Ryan, John Falconer, John Moore, David Pleat, Terry Westley. I worked with all the old, the Luton coaches at the time, and they recognised I had a talent, and they supported me all the way. And without their guidance and their help, I wouldn't be where I am today.
Did you think at that time when you were 16 that you'd have the career that you're going to have?
No, not for a minute. I had 2 ambitions as a child growing up in Swansea, kicking the ball around the streets of the estate, and I wanted to be a professional footballer, and I wanted to play for my country. They were the 2 ambitions that I had, and I fulfilled both of them. And not for a minute did I even think when I went to Luton in 3 years' time I'd be off to Arsenal. Things just tend to go with the flow, really, and in the end I was very happy with the career that I had.
When it all started at Luton, did you think once you got that apprenticeship, did you think that you'd go on and get that professional contract?
Well, I was always hoping that I would get into the first team. That is the aim, that is the target, to push yourself into the reserves, to play well in the youth team, to score goals, and then to ultimately be recognised by the first team manager, who was David Pleat. And I think even in my youth days I was recognised by the first team manager. I was quickly making a big impression on the world of football. So 16, 17, David Pleat knows if he's got somebody quite decent in the youth team. And I was quickly pushed into the first team. I remember my strike partners were Dwight Marshall, Kerry Dixon, Tony Thorpe, Scott Oakes. So I had several strike partners while I was here, and playing with the likes of Trevor Peake and John Dreyer, in particular David Priest. Me and Priest were very close, and he was a great player for a centre forward to play with, because he used to hang the ball up, and he'd previously played with Mick and Kerry Dixon, so he knew my game. And he was obviously a terrible loss to everybody, was little Priesty. So playing with them experienced players, really stood me in good stead for the rest of my life.
You got off to the perfect start with a goal on your debut against Forest. Do you remember that?
Well, it wasn't actually my debut. My debut was against Cambridge on the Tuesday night in a low cup competition, and I made my first start, if you like, against Brian Clough's Nottingham Forest. And I think the back four that day, the two centre halves were Des Walker and Steve Chettle. Stuart Pearce played at left back, and a guy I went on to play quite a lot of times with Wales, Mark Crosley, who I roomed with Wales. He was in goals that day, and I scored a goal which was offside, and then I scored another goal which put Luton 1-0 up, and I think we lost the game 2-1. So it was a great day. All my family were here. I was 19. And to score against Brian Clough's Forest, that was pretty special as well, and that was my actual first start. And pretty much then I was in the side then quite regular.
And how was that as well? I mean, as a young boy, just playing what is now Championship football on a regular basis.
Well, that was fine, because I think when you're a youngster, you've got quite a lot of energy, a lot of desire. You question yourself as you get older. The more experience you get. People say it helps, but at 19 you're fearless. I would have run through a wall to win a header. So I was determined to get in, and I never really saw it as a problem. I was really in there, and I was in there on merits. I was in there because I was good enough to be in there.
Obviously, you hit the headlines with that goal against Newcastle that you saw earlier. I mean, how was that cup run as well, and all the fervour around that?
That was brilliant. It was quite surreal actually, because every time we had a win, we'd go up to Stephen Purdue's Henlow Grange, the Champneys Health Farms, and Stephen would spoil us as a group. He'd give us all the foods, the chicken wings, he'd put it all out for us. We'd have a couple of days massages, and David Fleet used to take us up there just before a big game, because there was several. There was Newcastle, home and away, there was West Ham, there was Cardiff, and eventually we lost at Wembley to Chelsea, where David Fleet still regrets playing Kerry Dixon that day because of his affinity with Chelsea. One of David Fleet's biggest regrets was he never started a young John Hartson that day. Who knows? Maybe the result wouldn't have been different, but I was certainly on fire that year. But he went with Kerry, and I came on for 25 minutes, my actual only appearance at Wembley Stadium in my life, that was.
And obviously, were you, even at that stage, were you aware of the interest surrounding you and the headlines that you would create?
Yeah, well, I think David Fleet actually said to me one day, he says, "John, go home, put a suit on, have a shave." He says, "We're going to go and meet George Graham." And I previously read in the papers that Liverpool were looking at me and things like that. And I went up to Arsenal with David that day, and we sat in his car. His phone was non-stop, people pressed trying to get hold of him. And we walked into the office. I didn't have an agent at the time, and George Graham actually said to me, he says, "John, if you sign for me today," he said, "Alan Smith has got injured this morning. Kevin Campbell has turned an ankle." He said, "If you sign today," this was the Thursday, he says, "you'll be playing on Saturday," he says, "out there with the England centre forward at the minute, which is Ian Wright, So I was 19, just coming from Luton, so that was massive. It was all over the papers, and I made my debut on the Saturday. I quickly signed in a game that we drew 1-1 at Highbury. Duncan Ferguson got sent off for Everton, and Wrighty got our goal. So I was all of a sudden an Arsenal player, from having pictures of the Mersons and the Wrights and the Adamses all over my wall as a kid growing up. My heroes are mine. I was taken to the field with them, so it was quite surreal, and it happens quite quickly. But had 2 fantastic years at Arsenal.
How did your life change after Luton? Was it quite substantial in, from going from a small club in Luton to, a massive club that's Arsenal?
Yeah, well, obviously, your profile gets bigger and everything else. But in terms of my life, I've never changed. I'm still the same John at 37 years of age as what I was at 16. I'm from a council estate. My mates are still the same. I've played with all these wonderful players. I've played for my country over 50 times, and I've hit some really big heights in my life, and I've hit quite a few lows as well with my cancer, and my friends and family have always been there for me, and I'm a Swansea boy, through and through, and I went on to have this wonderful career, but it's never got to my head. I've never been egoistic or anything like that. I'm proud of my career, but I'm still the same John that I was 20 years ago,
And what are the things you think that you learned whilst you were at Luton that you took on and used in your...
Well, I learned to grow up at Luton. When you leave your parents, you live with the family, you have to get yourself in and out of the football ground every day for a start.
Was that a shock?
Yeah, it was hard work. It's difficult, it's difficult, because if I stayed at Swansea, I'd probably just hang around the street corners with my friends. So you're going into a totally new environment, and also you have to train every day, which can be difficult physically because you're not used to that. You're only used to training in school holidays with the school, whatever you are. So physically it can be hard. It tests you. The pre-season training used to kill me. I remember me and Kerry Dixon used to do pre-season together, but he was my age now when I was 18 or 19, and he was still beating me. But no, it was a great time, and as I said, I learned a lot from my young days at Luton, playing with them experienced players, and just a wonderful time. And I think anybody who's ever come through the system at Luton, you know, shared them same experiences of being an apprentice, where you're cleaning people's boots and you're cleaning the stands and you're cleaning the dressing rooms, and you're idolising them first team players as a 16, 17-year-old. They always say nice things about the club, you know, and it is something that's really close to my heart, is Luton, you know, as not just as a football club, but as a place. I arrived today for this dinner and I drove around for an hour and a half, and I went to see my ex-landlady, and it's been 20 years, and you know,
shocked?
Yeah, definitely she was shocked, and you know, there's things in Bury Park, you know, the McDonald's is not there anymore. You know, and I spent all my afternoons in that place, and the casino's not there anymore, which used to be there, which I paid a few visits to as well. So Luton's changed, you know, and it's been 20 years. And of all the clubs I played for, I always went back with other clubs, but never come back to Luton. So I've been looking forward to this event for a few months. I knew it was in the diary. So I hope we'll have a great night, and you know, Luton's been a great place for me.